عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. So far we've said that being Jewish, being Christian, being Zoroastrian, these are forms of distortions of that pure Muhammadan Islam, and that Islam hasn't come to complement Judaism or Christianity or Zoroastrianism. The Islam of one prophet has come to complement the Islam of the preceding prophet. Otherwise, for perfection to complement an imperfection, that would be a contradiction in terms. Next, we said that these distortions can be doctrinal in origin, they can be ethical in origin, and we gave examples of doctrinal distortions, ethical distortions, and that how we as Muslims, although we are Muslims on the surface, we can in essence be, albeit partially, we can be Christian or Jewish, and will be resurrected as a Jew or a Christian, albeit partially. And we gave examples. Now this next theme tonight, inshallah, just continuing from last night, and inshallah we'll finish it tonight and we'll start a new theme tomorrow, is in chapter 5, verse 51. The question is, how can we evaluate ourselves? For example, how can we ascertain how much of a Jew or Christian we are essentially? Well, one way is analyzing our doctrine or evaluating our ethics with those examples we gave last night. But this verse of the Quran, things become a bit more difficult. Although one of the brothers did advise me yesterday that maybe I shouldn't focus on the fear aspect too much and give a bit more hope. Thank you. And he was right. Although I had a particular agenda, but I didn't mean to sound too pessimistic. I just want to convey these principles, inshallah, so we can learn a bit more. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who believe, la tattakhidhul yahuda wan nasara awliya. Don't take Jews or Christians as your wali. Whoever translates this wali as a friend, it's definitely inaccurate here, because the Holy Messenger expressed utmost friendship to all people, even the mushrikeen. It's the wali, the guardian. Don't take Jews or Christians as your guardian. Ba'dhuhum awliya'u ba'd, some of them are guardians over the other. وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُم مِّنكُمْ, those amongst you who take them as wali, as their guardians, فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ, okay, they'll be one of them. They may on the outside be Muslim and abide by the Zahir of Islam, but in essence they would be one of them, and they'll be resurrected as one of them, albeit partially, more or less. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Then it says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah won't guide the wrongdoing people. So here we see that in this verse, there's another form of how one can be resurrected as a Jew or a Christian. And that's when you submit to their guardianship. Once you submit to their guardianship, you will become resurrected, partially. I'm not saying completely. It's not a 0 or 100% thing. It's not black or white. So to the degree you submit, you're going to be one of them to that degree. And therefore, inna Allaha la yahdil qawma dhalimin. You're compromising your guidance. Allah is not going to guide the wrongdoing people. You did the wrongdoing. What was it? You became one of them. How? You submitted to their guardianship. You're compromising your guidance. And you're going to be resurrected as one of them. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. It's very explicit. Now this, for us, for most of us who have come from the West and who live in the West, although it's not a West or East issue anymore, this applies anywhere along the globe, not only confined to the West. If you live in a state, in a country, where the guardian of that country is either Jewish or Christian, non-Muslim, or even if they're a Muslim, but the Muslim who is heading that country is submitting to the guardianship of a non-Muslim. We have plenty of those countries, Muslim countries. Maybe most Muslim countries are like this, where there may be a Muslim governor heading the country, but that Muslim governor is submitting to the guardianship of a non-Muslim. And we've come from countries in America, in Europe, or whatever, and the head of state, they're a Christian, Jew, or whatever, but they're non-Muslim. When you live in a country where the head is non-Muslim and there's a law of that land, by default you're submitting to it. By default. It's not a very good decision. Now, maybe most of you, your parents made that decision. It wasn't a good decision in most cases. It may have been driven by monetary reasons, financial reasons, a better life, a better worldly life. And it may have been for good reasons too. There may be good reasons too. But the decision wasn't a good decision, all in all. Because by making that decision, they made a voluntary decision to submit to non-Muslim guardianship. And therefore, by default, they'll be one of them unless they compensate. I'll explain what that means. But what does it mean to submit oneself to non-Muslim guardianship, irrespective of whether, as I say, it can be a Muslim ruler, but that Muslim ruler is submitting to non-Muslim guardianship, and you therefore, by default, are also submitting to non-Muslim guardianship. For example, in England we have something called the inheritance tax. Allah gives the rules of inheritance. This government gives the rules of inheritance. Okay? That, let's say 30-40% of your wealth goes to the government after you die. Allah has His own way of how your money has to be spent. The government of, the Queen, for example, in England, they have their way of deciding things. You, by living there, have submitted to this ruling, which is not on a par with Allah's ruling. Now, don't get me wrong. In fiqh, in jurisprudence, it says you have to respect the law of the land. There's no doubt. That I have no problem with. No one has a problem. No one says go against the law of the land. That would be haram. You either don't go there, but once you go there, you have to respect the law of the land, especially in these legal matters. Although, as long as it doesn't make you do something haram. But here they say you respect the law of the land, and therefore you do these kind of things. It would be permissible. But the point is this, that although from a fiqhi, zahiri, superficial point of view, they would say it's okay, you're contaminating yourself from a tariqah point of view. This has not been paid attention to. I don't want to sound pessimistic here. I'm saying that we've become too comfortable with the notion of respecting the law of the land. Respecting the law of the land is a must. Okay, no problem. But we've become too comfortable with this, neglecting the whole notion that even though it's permissible, it's okay, it doesn't mean you're growing spiritually by submitting to that guardianship. Actually, you're contaminating yourself. You're slowly but surely killing the soul when you submit to non-Islamic rule. In the Quran, sometimes Allah is referred to as the wali, sometimes Iblis is referred to as the wali. In this verse, Jews and Christians are referred to as the wali. You're submitting to a wali that is other than outside Allah's jurisdiction. And you've done that voluntarily. If you become comfortable with that, you're going to be resurrected as one of them. You have to compensate. And compensating doesn't mean stealing from them. No, you can't steal from them. You can't cheat the system there. You have to respect the law of the land there. You're a Muslim. Act as an ambassador. Let them see what Islam means. This notion of being able to cheat them, steal from them, do this, do that, that's a wrong notion. That only applies when two countries are at war with one another. You're an ambassador to Islam. You have to let all people see what Islam is embodied like. But this idea of submitting, it's problematic. And you'll be resurrecting yourself as one of them. Schools, normal schools that you take your children to voluntarily. What are they being taught? Look, what are they being taught? The things that they're being taught is under the jurisdiction of that non-Muslim guardianship. There are many things that we don't want our children to be taught. But now you're living there, you're almost forced for your children to listen to things. Is that right? This is another example of taking or submitting to that non-Muslim guardianship. There's this UNESCO program, 2030 they call it, that in the year 2030 we tell the world how they have to live and explain the lifestyle, that everyone understands one another. And even in Mecca, when you do the sa'i between Safa and Marwa, the bridges that you pass, you see this 2030 being advertised. Look at the crippling state of the Muslim affairs. That they're advertising this 2030, even in Mecca, the house of Allah, on the bridges between Safa and Marwa. Although Safa and Marwa is not, strictly speaking, part of Masjid al-Haram, but still, even in Iran, they were almost on the brink of advertising this. in this 2030 protocol, it accepts and teaches how we have to accept these civil partnerships. 2 men marrying, 2 women marrying, and so on and so forth. Homosexuality, these. It's, this is part of that 2030 program. Even in Iran, with all the different institutes, cultural institutes that they have, it still slipped through somehow. And we have many Muslim institutes worldwide. They send representatives in UNESCO. They want some representation. And they're propagating this 2030 program. This is wrong. What are you doing? These Muslims who go and get representation in these world institutes, they're doing it for self-interests. But in the long run, they're going to be destroying their own communities by doing this. You only submit to Muslim guardianship, Islamic law, not just to anything for the sake of enhancing interests of your own or your community. It's going to be poisonous for you in the long run. And you may think of better examples. The examples I give are just things that have come to mind, but you may think of better examples where you shouldn't submit to this kind of guardianship. But let's say now you're there, you're in such a situation, it wasn't out of your own doing. Okay, you can still leave. Okay, let's assume you can't leave. You have to compensate. If you feel at ease with submitting under non-Muslim guardianship and you're relaxed about that, that's going to be how you're going to be resurrected, albeit partially in the hereafter as one of them. But you can compensate. You can compensate. I'll give 1 or 2 examples in a minute. But the point is this, that the head, the guardian of any given country, it doesn't matter whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, or does it? If they're non-Muslim, you can't submit to their guardianship. If they're Muslim, it depends. That Muslim guardian, are they submitting to non-Muslim guardianship themselves, or are they submitting to Allah's guardianship? There's a difference there. It makes a difference. But look, imagine 2 countries, one led by a non-Muslim guardian, but all the rulings of that country are Islamic in nature. But the guardian is non-Muslim. In another country, there's a Muslim guardian, a true Muslim guardian, but only 5% of Islam is practiced in that country. Which one is better? And the answer is the one where the guardian is Muslim guardianship. And you shouldn't feel comfortable in the other country. Just because, let's say 90% of those rulings are all Islamic, but the guardian is non-Muslim. No, that's not acceptable. You can't give your submission to a non-Muslim. That non-Muslim won't work in the best interest of Islam and Muslims around the world. They may practice 90% of all Islamic rulings, but they may go to Yemen and cause a massacre. They may go to Palestine and do what they do. They may go to Kashmir, they do what they do. Pakistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and so on and so forth. They'll pillage, usurp, and kill the Muslims. But yes, in their own country, you see 90% of Islam being practiced, but they're a non-Muslim guardian. And you would be responsible if you live in that country. You'll be resurrected with their actions. Your taxes is contributing to those actions. If you feel comfortable with that, it's a problem. You're going to be one of them in the hereafter. So you have to compensate. Those demonstrations against what they're doing in Yemen, in Bahrain, you have to be active. You have to do something. If a Muslim body doesn't become active in these kind of issues, you have to doubt that Muslim body. Very seriously, they're too comfortable with the non-Muslim guardian. No one forced us to live under non-Muslim guardianship. You have the choice. You have that choice. With many people in the hereafter, it's a verse in the Holy Quran, the angels will tell them in the questioning of the grave, how come you've ended up here? They say, we were of the oppressed. We had no choice. We were under the oppression of non-Islamic guardianship. We didn't know what to do. We were of the mustad'afin. It's in the Holy Quran. I can't remember the verse now. And then the angels will say, well, the earth was spacious. You could have gone away. This is an explicit questioning of the angels to you, and it's in the Quran. Who is your Lord? Who is your Prophet? What is your book? These are in the ahadith. But why did you stay there? Why did you stay under non-Muslim guardianship? The earth was spacious. You could have gone somewhere else. This kind of questioning, it's explicit in the Quran. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everyone who lives in the UK, in America, in Europe, for them to leave tomorrow. No, there's no need. Actually, there's no need. You can stay. But two things. Don't be comfortable. Don't be comfortable. Integration has its limits. No one's forcing you to stay there. And if you do, you have to compensate. Otherwise, you'll be killing your soul. Don't fool yourself. So, the guardian has to be Muslim. And not only Muslim, they have to be an Islamic authority. They know what they're talking about. It's a qualification. They may be Muslim, but they may not count or qualify as an Islamic authority. And they may be submitting to Judaic or Christian guardianship. And we have many Muslim countries like that today. Imagine two cars. The driver, one of the drivers, they're sober, but all the passengers are drunk, for example. In the other car, the driver is drunk, but the passengers are all sober. Who's going to reach the destination? Who's going to reach that destination of theirs? The driver has to be sober. The guardianship has to be on a par with what Allah has ordained, not under Jewish or Christian guardianship. And therefore, وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُم مِنْكَ, those amongst you who submit to their guardianship, فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ, you're going to be one of them. You're going to be resurrected as one of them. You're a Jew partially. You're a Christian partially. And therefore, comments such as, I see Islam in X country in the West. When I go there, I see Islam. But when I come in these Muslim countries, there's no Islam. I see Muslims, but no Islam. When I go there, I don't see any Muslims. But I see Islam. Calm down. Calm down. Be respectful to Islam, first of all. Islam doesn't mean just a few clean toilets and a bit of good queuing. Islam is much more deeper than that. It goes back to wilaya. It goes back to the guardianship. Just because they can queue better or they have cleaner facilities, just calm down a bit. Islam isn't confined to such things. So, you have to submit to an Islamic authority. Now, if you're in a country which has a non-Islamic authority, you have to say, look, I want to live my life according to an Islamic authority. Now, maybe from one non-Muslim country, you may migrate to another non-Muslim country, which there you can submit to your Islamic authority easier. Okay? Even though in that country, the authority isn't Islamic authority, but you can submit to your Islamic authority with ease, with no problem. It's possible. Or in America, for example, from one state you go to another state. You can submit to that Islamic authority of yours easier in the other state. And so on and so forth. No one is saying you have to go to that Muslim country which has that Islamic authority. And as I say, most Muslim countries anyway, they're under the guardianship of the Jews or Christians. You have to see, where can you comfortably submit to your Islamic authority? In which country? It may be in the West, it may be in the East. But you have to do that. And when you submit to your Islamic authority, it has to be in relation to all aspects of Islam. That Islamic authority has to be an authority not only in relation to the individual ibadat and mu'amalat, the individual acts of worship and the transactions which deals with the individual. No. It has to be socio-political, judiciary, military, everything. Islam isn't only about you doing your ibadat comfortably under an Islamic authority. If you say it is, that's American Islam. That's the Islam they want, the enemy wants. You have to submit to an Islamic authority in all fields. It's an Islamic authority. Islam has something to say in all fields. You can't limit it. You can't say, I'll accept some of the book and reject other parts of it. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْدِ. You accept, have faith in part of the book, but in relation to part of the book, you don't, you deny it. فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Those who do this, practice some of it and they deny other parts of it, they're not going to have anything but disgrace in this world. They're going to encounter disgrace. That is their fate. Islam is Islam. If you say, I'm going to submit to an Islamic authority, that's good. But only in these respects, in relation to the socio-political, that and the other things, no, there's no need. Then the question arises, so okay, in those other things, in those other areas, who will you submit to then? You don't want to submit to an Islamic authority, so who will you submit to? Either you will say, I won't submit to anyone until the 12th Imam comes, and then Islam remains stagnant until that time. He may come in 1,000,000 years' time. Or you will say, just the law of the land. Well, that goes back to that chapter 5, verse 51. You're submitting, therefore, in those other things which you weren't ready to submit under Muslim guardianship, you're submitting to Jewish or Christian guardianship. And you'll be resurrected as one of them again. The Islamic authority has been authority in all fields. Imam Ali alayhi salam was an authority in all fields. He only had 5 years of governance. But before that, and during those 5 years, he was the Islamic authority. Now, for a period of time, he wasn't assigned as the Khalifa, so to speak, by the people. But he was the Khalifa, he was the Imam. Before those 5 years of his governance, we had to choose him and be under his guardianship. When he was the governor, we still had to be under his governorship. There's no difference. with Imam Hadi, with Imam Askari, alayhim as-salam, they were under house arrest most of their years. But they would mastermind uprisings whilst under house arrest. Just because they're under house arrest, it doesn't mean they can't be an Islamic authority. Now today, the question is, some people may say, no, Islam doesn't need to be enforced in the socio-political, judiciary, military fields. Let the 12th Imam come. These people will be resurrected as Sunnis. Now, when I say as Sunnis, please, I don't mean that in a derogatory manner at all. But there's a reason, there's a point here. Well, you all know that one of the main differences is what happened in Saqifa after the demise of the Holy Messenger. What was the difference? What happened? In the Holy Quran, it says, Ya ayyuhal Rasul, balligh ma unzila ilayk min rabbik. O Messenger, propagate that which has been revealed to you from your Lord. Now, this was towards the end of the 23 years. All the ahkam had been covered. What was referred to here? And this is referring to the event at Ghadir Khum, where the successorship of Amir al-Mu'mineen was mentioned and made explicit. Some people didn't accept that. And then after the demise of the Holy Messenger, they had elections amongst people, so-called elections. The point was, Islam was in governance the last 10 years of the Holy Messenger, and Islam had to continue to be enforced. Islamic governance had to continue. Islamic enforcement had to continue. You can't just stop it. Here, Allah chose who should succeed and continue this enforcement of Islam. Allah endorsed that person. And with the next 12 successors, Allah has endorsed it. But then the 12th Imam enters occultation. A new test arises now. So with Ghadir Khum, yes, the Sunni Shia divide, it happened. No one is saying a Shia is better than a Sunni is better than a Shia. Something different so that exists. But then within the Shias, during the time of occultation, another test arises. And amongst these Shias, some remain as Shias, some are Shias who will be resurrected as Sunni. Who are they? They who say that, no, there's no enforcement necessary. Allah hasn't ordained any protocol to tell us what to do. And they say we have to wait for the 12th Imam. Or they submit to non-Muslim guardianship. Or they submit to a Muslim who submits to non-Muslim guardianship. During occultation, in those socio-political, judiciary, military affairs, who are you going to submit to? There's one verse in the Holy Quran which sheds light on this. That why should you think, just because of the martyrdom of the Imams or the occultation of the Imam, Islam has to be stagnant in certain areas. In this verse of the Holy Quran, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ, the Holy Messenger is but a prophet. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُولُ, before him there were messengers. أَفَإِن مَاتَ, if he was to die, أو قُتِلْ, if he was to be killed, إِنْ قَلَبْتُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِكُمْ, will you turn back on your heels? just because he's dead or he's been killed? Does that mean now you come back from Islamic enforcement and Islam becomes stagnant for a period of time? Allama Tabatabai says, turning back on your heels is tantamount to non-Islamic rule. The verse, therefore, which is revealed in a reprimanding and chastising context, means the following. The Holy Messenger is nothing more than a messenger, like all previous messengers, whose function is but to propagate the message of his Lord. As long as Allah subsists, religion will stay. Hence, it makes no sense to say that faith is dependent on his life, as is portrayed by many of you who plan to abandon religion were he to die, and you that would then turn back on your heels and thus opt for deviation after having trod upon guidance. It makes no sense. Just because the Prophet has passed away, religion continues. Just because the 12th Imam has entered occultation, religion continues. Doesn't make sense to abrogate or stagnate part of religion for a period of time. That can't be justified. And then elsewhere, he's quoted as having said, it's understood from this verse that the Muslims ought not allow Islamic governance to slip out of their hands following the demise of the Holy Messenger. Okay, now here, with that verse, it's a code. It's a code for the next test, which happens during occultation in relation to the 12th Imam. And the code is this. Now this, what I'm about to read, is not a verse of the Holy Quran. But you can extrapolate this logic from that previous verse I mentioned. وَمَا مَهْدِيٌّ إِلَّا إِمَامٌ. The 12th Imam is but an Imam. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الْأَئِمَّةِ. And there were Imams previous to him. أَفَإِنْ غَابَ أَوْ قُتِلَ. If he was to go to occultation, or if he was to be killed, انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Would you turn back on your heels? To what degree? How much? Why? As long as Allah is, religion is. What justification do you have? Just because it's an occultation. So here you make the wrong decision. It may be easy to make the right decision for Ghadir Khom 1400 years ago. But most may fail in this decision today, and therefore be a Sunni, be resurrected as a Sunni, or be they a Dhahiri Shia. And you look, this where the problem with submitting to non-Islamic guardianship, and the problem with not accepting the idea that the Islamic authority is the Islamic authority in all areas, including the socio-political, judiciary, military matters. The problem is this, that all those thousands of prophets, most of them, they were slaughtered. Why were they slaughtered? It wasn't a case that they were always just in their own homes or teaching people individual things. They made certain efforts. As a result of those efforts, most of them were killed. Most of the prophets. We have to say to ourselves, why were they killed? What were they doing? In chapter 33, verse 39, الَّذِينَ يُبَلِّغُونَ رِسَالَاتِ اللَّهِ. They were propagating the messages of Allah. وَيَخْشَوْنَهُ. They feared Allah. وَلَا يَخْشَوْنَ أَحَدًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ. They feared no one but Allah. That's a sign for an Islamic authority. They fear no one but Allah. In contemporary times, the true model would be Imam Khomeini, rahmatullah alayh, where even when he was in Iraq and the Ba'athis entered the mosque that he was in, and many Ayatollahs stood up for the Ba'athis, he stood sitting. He remained sitting. He wasn't scared of the Ba'athis. He was never scared to give what an Islamic authority has to give. And when it was time for war, it was war. When it wasn't, it wasn't. Or Shahid Sadr, for example, in Iraq. He went out with the call. He got martyred, and many along with him. These people are on a par with the true Islamic authority. They're not scared of martyrdom. They're not scared of anyone but Allah. Islam has to be practiced. Islam has to be enforced. Don't submit to non-Islamic guardianship, either directly or indirectly. All our prophets, they were martyred, they were killed. Why? Because they were doing something. What? Whatever they were doing, they weren't scared of anyone but Allah. It wasn't a case of them wanting to do ahkam, teaching ahkam. They weren't killed for that. There's no fear for that. The praise in the verse of the Quran for these prophets wasn't just because they weren't scared in giving ahkam. The propagation was in all aspects of Islam they wanted to propagate. In chapter 3, verse 146, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن نَبِيٍّ قَاتَلَ مَعَهُ رِبِّيُّونَ كَثِيرٌ. How many a prophet fought, accompanied with them godly men. How many a prophet have fought, and with them godly men. فَمَا وَهَنُوا لِمَا أَصَابَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They never lost assurance due to what they were afflicted with in their cause of Allah. They never lost that assurance. وَمَا ضَعُفُوا. They were never weakened. وَمَا اسْتَكَانُوا. They never submitted. See, this is the model of the prophets. The Islamic authority has to have this model. Only then the issue of Yemen, of Bahrain, Palestine, there can be some improvement. Otherwise, we're just submitting. We're just contributing. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, in tuti'ul ladhina kafaru, O you who believe, if you obey the disbelievers, if you go under their guardianship, yaruddukum ala a'qabikum, they'll make you turn against your heels. They'll make you go against Islamic guardianship. They'll make you go against that Islamic lifestyle that you should lead. It's a cause and effect relationship. On a par with you obeying disbelievers, this will happen. Islam is more than just setting hospitals, opening charities, doing community work. This is a small part. But this is not the whole picture. And it's not the more important aspect of Islam either. Chapter 9, verse 19. أَجَعَلْتُمْ سِقَايَةَ الْحَاجِ وَإِمَارَةَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ كَمَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَجَاهَدَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا يَسْتَوُونَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Do you compare those who give water to the pilgrims and who, for example, build or renovate Masjid al-Haram? They do this kind of things. And these are just two examples, but we can extend it So other examples, make centers, do this, do that, this community work. Do you compare that with those who believe in Allah and the last day and they strive in the way of Allah? They do jihad in the way of Allah. Don't compare them. But definitely don't suffice with the first one. And then finally, in that verse of Qadir Khum, which we mentioned, Balligh, that propagate that which was revealed to you, the verse after that, there's a code that commentates on the nature of this Balligh, propagate. In chapter 5, verse 68, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لَسْتُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ. O people of the book, Muslims, Christians, Jews, you're nothing, of no value. What the life you're leading is based on nothing. Hatta, unless تقيم التوراة والإنجيل وما أنزل إليك من ربكم. Unless you establish the Torah, the Injil, and that's which has been revealed to you from your Lord, being the Quran. They have to be established. The book has to be established. But don't accept some of the book and deny other parts of the book. The whole book has to be established. Inshallah, since my time has passed, inshallah, I'll continue with the poems tomorrow. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala ta'ala.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها بعدد ما تبني الملك. اللهم لنبل الظالمين ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن الإصابة التي جادت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت بقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم همه شب جمعه شب زیارتی اربابه همه خودشون جز زوار و ثبت و ضبط کنن السلام علی الحسین أصحاب الحسين حسين جان حسين جان حسين جان حسين بس که بود دل رو با زمزمه یا حسین بس که بود دل رو با زمزمه داده به دل ها صفا زمزمه یا حسین مثل نسیم سحر عقد گشایی کند باز دل با زمزمه یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 تو رو خدا همه صدا بزن یا حسین اوج دهد نام او به عرش اعلی مرا برد مرا تا خدا زمزمه یا حسین چون که دل عاشقم تنت حریمش شود میبردم کربلا زمزمه یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین انشالله بین الحرمین ببینمت حسین حسین یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 نام او را صدا زند در جزا هر که کند در عذاب زمزمه یا حسین منتقم زورش کند به عشق و شور و نوا زمزمه یاسین از حرم و قتلگر تا دم آخر بود همه سادات را زمزمه یاسین یه بیت من بریم کربلا شب جمعه غریب مادر حسین زمزمه فاطمه است غریب مادر حسین زمزمه فاطمه است امشب شب جمعه کربلا غوغای همه انبیا میان کربلا ظاهر حسینن همه اولیا میان کربلا ظاهر حسینن امشب رسول الله میاد کربلا امشب امیر المؤمنین میاد کربلا امشب مادرش فاطمه میاد کربلا ظاهر حسین نشه امشب کربلا روز خانش مادرش فاطمه است میدونی چطور روزه میخوانه یه قتلوك ذبوك ومن الماء منوك یعنی حسین جان مادر کشتندم با آبت ندادن اگر کشتن چرا آبت ندادن چرا زان دور نایابت ندادن هلال ابن نافع میگه صدای آتش حسین شنیدم دلم سوخت ظرفی از آب پر کردم اومدم به طرف گودی قتلگاه اما دیدم شم داره بیرون میاد گفت هلال کجا داری میری گفتم صدای آتش حسین شنیدم دارم براش آب میبرم گفت هلال برگرد من حسین سیرابش کردم گفتم نامرد تو که آب نداشتی چگونه حسین سیراب کردی بگم شب جمعه صدا گریاتو حبس نکن صدا گریت برسه کربلا رسول الله فرمود فاطمه جان روز قیامت همه چشما گریان فقط چشمی که برای حسین تو گریه کرده باشه شاده حالا گریه کن گفتم نامرد که آب نداشتی چطور حسین سیرابش کردی دیگه یه دفعه دیدم لباسشو کنار زد دیدم سر بریده حسینه حسین گم الان اون موقعی که رو سینه حسین نشسته بودم اومدم سر از تن حسین جدا کنم یه ناله جان سوزی رو شنیدم از گوشه قتلگاه می آمد هی میگم غریب مادر حسین عزیز مادر حسین یه جای دیگم مادرش فاطمه شب جمعه بگم با هم گریه کنیم با هم زمان گریه یه جای دیگم مادرش آمد کجا آمد مادر زن خولی میگه نیمای شب از خواب بلند شدم دیدم مطبخ روشنه خدا جریان چیه میگه وارد مطبخ شدم دیدم همه روشنایی از تنور خانه است خدا من تنور که خاموش کردم میگه جلو آمدم یه نگاه کردم دیدم یه سر بریده تو تنور خانه است همه این نور از این سر بریده است خدا این سر بریده کیه دیدم یه مدتی از آسمان فرود آمد دیدم چند خانم مجلله زیر بغلای خانم قد خمیده رو گرفتن دارن میارن دیدم این خانم به سینه میزنه میگه غریب مادر عزیز مادر میگه ایستادم دارم نگاه میکنم این خانم چه میکنه میگه دیدم این خانم نزدیک آمد کنار تنور خانه میگه دست داخل تنور کرد سر بریده رو برداشت به سینه چسباند هی میگم حسین غریب مادر اینجا تنها جایی نبود که مادر و سر حسین به سینه میچسبانه شب اول محرم همین روزه رو برات خواندم بازم تکرار کنم اون موقعی که مادر امیرالمومنین کفن کرد صدا زد بچه‌ها بیاید با مادر خداحافظی کنید امام حسن یه طرف اومد حسین یه طرف اومد این سیسرها رو به سینه مادر گذاشتن اینجا هم مادر دست گردن حسینش انداخت سر حسین رو به سینه چسباند حالا ناله بزن بگو یا حسین کربلا کعبه دلاست خدا میداند آرزو دیدنش آرزوی ماست خدا میداند اولین مستمع فیض حسین مادرش حضرت زهراست خدا میداند این عین روایته اولین مستمع فیض حسین مادرش حضرت زهراست خدا میداند اینو امام صادق علیه السلام فرمود گفت هر کجا خیلی عزایی به پا میشه همینجا ما اعتقادمون اینه امام صادق علیه السلام فرمود هر کجا خیلی عزا و روزه میگیرن برای جد ما حسین اولین کسی که وارد مجلس میشه مادر ما فاطمه است میاد تو مجلس برای حسینش گریه میکنه من و تو هم با مادرش فاطمه هم ناله میشیم مگه امام صادق به ابا بصیر نفر بود اما بسیر آیا نمیخوای مادر ما فاطمه رو یاری کنی؟ فرمود آقا جان من چطور میتونم مادر شما فاطمه رو یاری کنم؟ گفت بیا برا جد غریب ما حسین گریه کن. با گریه کردن برا حسین مادر ما فاطمه رو یاری میکنیم. یعنی مادر ما گریه میکنه تو هم گریه کن. تو هم با مادر ما بگو حسین جانم حسین جانم حسین. حالا عشق جاری این روایتم بگم بسنم. آقا رسول الله فرمود روز قیامت که میشه خانم فاطمه زهرا و عده‌ای از خانم‌ها وارد محشر میشن. خطاب میاد فاطمه جان وارد بهشت بشو. میگه نه تا ندونم بعد از با حسین چه کردن من وارد بهشت نمیشم. بگم صدا نالا بلند میشه. خطاب میاد یا فاطمه به وسط محشر نگاه کن، به قلب محشر نگاه کن. یه دفعه مادر برمیگرده نگاه میکنه میبینه حسینش ایستاده اما دیگه سر در بدن نداره. میگن چنان ناله فاطمه زهرا میزنه همه ملائک با خانم هم ناله میشن. حالا با مادرش ناله بزن بگو یا حسین